Hello and welcome to the tutorial to use the editor for the Little Hoarders game. This tutorial will show you how to create levels, maps, buildings, items and workers so you can create your own ecosystems for the Little Hoarder game. You will need to have Java installed on your system before you can run the editor. Links to the editor will be in the description below. You will also need some images before you start. If you do not have any images, then you can use the images that were used in the Little Hoarder game. A link to these will be in the description, although it might be fun to create your own. After you created your project, you will need some web space to upload it to, so others will be able to download and play what you have created. This tutorial will recreate all the buildings etc. that were used in the Little Hoarders game. From this you should be able to modify them and create your own unique ecosystem. When you first open the editor, you will be greeted with the Global Configuration menu. From here you can set some basic global information about your project. The first thing you need to do is browse to an existing project or an empty folder. For this tutorial I will browse to an empty folder. In the game title, enter a name for your project. This will help players identify your project after they have downloaded it. I'm going to enter Tutorial. Next we have the version of your project. This is made up of a major version number, that is before the period, and a minor version after the period. So this number must always be something period something. Let's use 1.0 as this is a new project. This version allows the Little Hoarders game to check if you have updated your files on your web space. If the major version has increased, then it will download all the files etc. again. If the minor version has changed, then it will download anything new that it hasn't already got. The editor will warn you as to what version needs to be increased when you save a completed project, but you should only need to increase the major version if you have changed existing images. The default locale is the language that all project text must be supplied in. The game itself is only in English and translated German at the time of recording this, with it defaulting to English for all other locales. The default locale you set to will be the language that all other locales default to, unless you supply additional text for that locale. I am going to use EN, which is the locale code for English. On every form page of the editor there is a help button. Clicking this button will give you some information on the components of that page. When you are happy with everything, click Start to start editing your new project. We will go through all the sections on this page as we create things. You can always click Help at the bottom for an overview. Typically, as you create things, you'll be working from top to bottom. Bear in mind that some things cannot be edited if they are being referenced by something else. For example, you cannot delete wood if it is a part of a tree, and you cannot change the size of a tree's image if it has already been placed on the map. The editor will warn you if something like that happens. You will need to remove or change the thing that is referenced in it, so planning and testing as you go is a very good idea. Let's start by creating a tree. A tree contains wood, so we need to create wood first. To create wood, click Add New Item. As this item will appear in a warehouse, we will need to give it some localized text. But first we will need to give it a name. This will allow you to identify it in the editor. The name never gets used in the game, so you can put what you like. This is for your reference. I'm going to call it Wood. Now let's set the localized text that will be used in game. Click the Localized Text button. First I must enter some text in my default locale, which is EN. I will put Wood as the title and in the description some information to help the player. When I am happy with what I have put, I click Add. Let's add some additional text for German. I will put DE into the locale box as DE is the locale code for German. Enter the translation for wood into the title and the translated description. Thanks Google. I will then click Add again. Notice there is a start on the page's title bar. This shows us there are unsaved changes on this page. We can save our changes using the Save button. Note that saving on this page will only save our changes into memory. We now have two rows in the table, one for English text and one for German. I can select a row and click Edit to change the text and then re-add it to the table. If the locale already exists in the table, it will be updated. Otherwise, it will be added as a new row. I can select a row and remove it if I wish. Note we cannot remove the default locale row as we will always need a default locale. If we do not like the changes we have made, we can revert them. Clicking the revert button will restore the changes as they were when we last saved. If we want to clear the whole table, we can do this by using the delete button at the bottom. Be careful as the delete button will also save, but will give you a warning first. The new button will clear all the text from the title and description. And as always, the help button will give you more information about this page. Now our texts have been added and saved, we can close this page. Nothing more needs to be added for Wood, so we can click Save to XML to permanently write our changes to file. Now we have our first basic warehouse item added to the project. If we want to add another item, we would need to click the New button. Notice that the slider now has two values on it. The number 1 is the ID of the wood we just added, and the number 2 is the ID of the new item we've just requested. We can use the slider to select another item, but first we must save the new item we are editing. Sometimes we must fill in mandatory information before we can save though. The editor will tell us what is missing when we try to select another item or click Save. We can remove an item using the Delete button. Note that when you delete an item, your changes will also be saved. The Revert button will restore any changes back to the last save. Let's close this page and get on with creating a tree. First click the Add New Map Item Images button and then enter a name into the name box. This name is used internally by the editor to identify the image set. It is also used in the folder naming, so special characters cannot be used. It will be lowercase and spaces will be replaced by an underscore when it is saved. I'm going to call this tree. Next we have span X and span Y. This is the size of the image in blocks. Each block is approximately 16 pixels for normal screen size. This will change depending on the device's screen resolution, but you do not need to worry about this, as the game will resize the images so they take up the same amount of space regardless of the screen size. I am going to enter 3 by 3 for the tree. The image size I'm using is 48 pixels by 48. Try not to use images that are too large, as they will have a larger file size and will end up getting resized down anyway. The span can go up to a maximum of 9 and must be at least 1. Now we have set the span, we can add a static image. The static image will be displayed when we add the tree to the map in the editor. Click the Add button under the image box and select the static image to be added to our project. Let's add some idle images next by clicking on the Idle Images button. Idle images are displayed in the game when nothing is interacting with the map item. These images are played in a loop and consist of either 1, 2, 4 or 8 images. The length of the loop is always the same amount of time, so if I added one image it will be displayed for 8 frames and then repeated. If I add 2 images, the first would be displayed for 4 frames and the second for 4 frames. 4 images would be displayed for 2 frames apiece, and 8 images would be a new image for each frame. I'm going to add 8 images for the tree. First I click the Add button. Here I can select all 8 images. Notice the last tree has a little red bird in it, which probably looks more like a red dot. This will only be shown for 1 frame every 8 frames. All the other frames will be just the tree, so we can create a very simple looped animation. I can reorder these images by using the swap button under the image. This will swap the position of the image to the one that's on its right. The clear button on the last image will remove that image, and of course the add button will add more images. Now that we are happy with these images, let's save and close. The last mandatory thing is the walkover grid. This allows us to set which parts of the images can be walked over by workers, or to be more accurate, the bottom right square of the worker. To configure the walkover grid, click on the walkover button. Note there is an image of the static image that we set and a grid that is 3 by 3, the same as the span X and span Y that we set. The default for all images is that they cannot be walked over. This is shown with a red overlay on all the squares. To set a square to be walked over, I need to click on the square that I want. This will remove the red overlay and show that the worker can walk on that bit. Later we will look at flat images, but for non-flat images, a worker will be drawn behind the image if the worker is higher up the screen. For a tree, I want the worker to be able to walk behind the whole image, apart from the trunk. So I will click all the squares that is not a trunk, like so. Now we need to set the image hotspot. A hotspot is a square that the worker will walk to and from when they are going to and from the map item. Currently there can only be one hotspot set, and this must be at the edge of the image. As my animations of the worker interacting with the tree are all on the right hand side of the tree, I will set the bottom right hand corner as the hotspot. To do this, we must click the mode button below the image and change it from mode walkover to mode entry exit. Now click on the square you want, in my case the bottom right, and it will get a blue overlay. Clicking on another square will move it. Note that the hotspot can be walked on by default, so if you had marked that square as to not be walked over, it would become a walked over square. Let's save and close. Let's add the creation images. In this case it will be the tree growing. First click on the creation button. If your file naming of your images are in alphabetical order, it'd be a lot easier to add them as you will not need to sort them afterwards. Mine however are not, so I will need to add them in stages. So click the add button and select the images you want. Notice there is a slider on this form. This allows me to slide along the images that I've already added in steps of 4. If I slide right to the end, I can see the add button to add more images. I also have the clear button to remove the last image added. And of course the swap buttons to reorder the images added. Remember, you can always use the new button at the bottom to clear all the images if you need to. Finally, we have the skip value. This allows you to select the number of frames each image will be displayed for in the game. The larger the number, the slower the animation will be. I'm going to set this to 2. You can have up to 20 frames skipped before the next frame is displayed. I am happy with this, so I will save and close. Next we have the destruction images. These are the frames that will be displayed when the map item is due to be removed from the map. First click the destruction button. For a tree I only want one image, a tree stump. But this will be displayed for 20 frames, so I'm going to set the skip to 20. Let's save and close. Now we have the action image sets. Let's click action. There are 3 types of actions. These are workers interacting with the map item, something happening to the map item after a certain amount of time has passed, or something happening to the map item when an item has been depleted. We don't need to worry about the type of actions here. We do that in the map item itself. All we need to do is define the images that each action will use. For a tree, there are only 2 action image sets that need to be defined. These are a worker planting the tree and a worker cutting the tree down. Let's define the images needed for planting a tree. First we need to give it a name. This is so we can identify it in the editor later. Something like planting. Now we need a skip value. I want it to be held for 2 frames for each image. Now let's add the images by selecting the Add button and then selecting the images. Once we are happy, click the Add button above the table to add it to the table. Now let's define the cutting down of the tree. Let's give it a name of cutting down, a skip of 2, and then add the images. And of course, add this to the table. You can edit a previously added image action set by clicking on the table row and then clicking Edit. When adding to the table, if the name is the same as one that is already in the table, it will overwrite. Otherwise, it will add a new row. You can also remove a row with the Remove button. Remember, New will always clear the image boxes, etc., and Delete will clear the table and save. Let's save and close. The only thing left on this page is movement, but as trees do not move, we do not need to do anything there. This will be covered with DIRs later. So let's save to XML, as now we have all our images in place. Note there will be some image copying taking place when you save to XML from a temporary folder to its permanent folder. And let's close. The final step in creating our tree is to create a tree map item. So let's click on Add New Map Item. First give it a name so we can identify it in the editor. The next step would be to set the image set to use, but as we have only defined one image set, it is pre-selected for us. We need to leave Is Flat unchecked, as a tree is not flat. Flat items can be walked over by workers, for example mountains, but with trees the workers will walk behind it rather than on it. We can click Show Attributes. This just tells the player what attributes this map item has if they click on it in the game. We will define the attributes in a minute. Allowed on is a list of map items that this map item is allowed to be placed upon. Grass means anywhere there is not an item, so let's check this. As we save more map items, this list will increase. Localized text allows us to add some text to be displayed to the player. Let's add some by clicking on Localized Text and giving it an English title of tree and a description. Now let's set up the actions against the tree. Click Actions. Actions are called from 3 places: from buildings, when an item has been depleted, or when a certain amount of time has expired. For a tree, our actions will be called by a building. We have 2 actions to define: planting the tree and cutting down the tree. We have already created the image sets for these actions. We now need to define what happens to the map item after these actions. Let's add a name for this action to be used internally by the editor. I'm going to call it Plant Tree. Next I'm going to select the planting image set. Let's leave map item as it is, more on that when we look at apple trees. Finally we need to set a state. This tells the game what to do after the image set, if any has been completed. There are 3 states: creation, where the creation images will be called; destruction, where the destruction images will be called and then the map item will be removed from the map; and finally none, where nothing will happen and the map item will go back to an idle state. For plant tree, we want to call the creation images after the animation, so we'll select creation and then add this to the table. Now we need to do one for cutting down the tree, so let's put cut down tree into the name box. Select the image action cutting down and then leave the map item as it is. This time we will select destruction, because the tree will be destroyed after it has been cut down. Let's save these changes. The only other thing on this page is after 1 second do nothing. As there is nothing we want to happen to the tree after time has expired, we can leave it as it is. Let's close this page. The last thing we need to do is set the attributes for the map item. Let's click the Attributes button. The item we want is wood, which has already been selected as the only item we've created so far. We only need 1 wood per tree, as it will be destroyed when we cut it down anyway. Nothing needs to happen when it is depleted, as the action already takes care of this. If it didn't, we could add an action here. So all we need to do is click the Add button to add this to the table, save and close. And that is everything needed for a tree, so let's save it to XML, and now we have our first map item. Let's close. Let's take a look at creating our first building. A forest would be a good place to start as they plant trees. Before we can create our forester, we need to create other items. Let's take a look at workers. First click the Edit Item button. We can see the wood we created earlier, so let's click New. Enter a name for the new item. This item is going to be a plank. We need planks for the construction of the forester, so we must create the item first. As this is a warehouse item, we are going to need to give some localized text. So click the localized text button and add some. That's it for the plank, so let's save that. We need to create a forester to work at the forester's hut, so let's click new item again. Enter a name, and as the forester needs to be in the warehouse, we need some localized text too. Next we need to add some images for the forester. First we need to set the span. A worker is 1 block across and 2 blocks high, so the span X is 1 and the span Y is 2. Now click the Add button and select our worker images. We need to supply 8 images, 2 for each direction. Notice above the images is the direction they should be facing, so let's swap them about until they are correct, and then save this to XML. Now we need to add images of a forester carrying a tree, so let's click New and add an internal name. As a forester carrying a tree will never appear in a warehouse, we do not need to give it localized text. Let's set the spans and add the images. We also need a leveler and a builder. These do appear in a warehouse, so they will need some localized text and images. Let me add them quickly. Now we have all the items and workers needed for the forester, so let's close this and click Add New Building Images. This page is very similar to the map item images page, but there are a few differences. So as before, let's add a name, a span for the size, and a static image. The static image will also be used in game on the Add Building screen, as the player is allowed to add this building to their map. Next we need to add the idle images. As with the map item, the idle images are displayed when nothing is happening to the building. They are also in a loop and must be either 1, 2, 4 or 8 images. However, the building can be in many different states when it is idle, especially during construction. But first, let's add the main idle loop. These images are displayed when the building is fully constructed. So click Add, select the images you want, enter a name for it, and then add it to the table. Notice this is marked as main. We must always have an image set marked as main, but there can only be one main idle set. Now let's add some construction images. These will be referenced later. It's up to you to decide what stages of construction and what is needed for construction, but here are the stages I have decided I wanted. First, I wanted an empty plot. This will be displayed whilst we're waiting for a leveler to arrive. After the leveler is finished, we have a dug plot, waiting for the first plank or builder to arrive. After the builder has built the frame, we have images of him pacing, waiting for the second plank to arrive. Finally, we have the completed building, waiting for the worker to arrive. Now for what I call the override idles. Here is a plot that has been dug. The plank has arrived, but we are still waiting for the builder. Here is a plot that has been dug. This time the builder has arrived first and we are waiting for the plank. Now we have our idols that are displayed after the forester's hut has been destroyed. First we have a plot that will disappear once the forester has left to go back to the warehouse. Next we have a plank of wood waiting to be collected by the warehouse. And finally an idol that displays if the forester is having an issue. Now these have all been added and are ready to be referenced later. Let's save and close. Next we need to set the walkover grid like we did with the tree. So let's deselect the tiles that the worker is allowed to walk over, or in this case behind, and set an entry exit which of course is a door, and then let's save and close. Now for the creation images, we have a lot of these from the empty plot to the fully constructed hut. And let's set a skip of 2. And let's do the same for the destruction images. The action images are for when the worker works at the building. As the forester plants a tree, we do not need to set any action images. Finally, we have the creation requirements and the destruction requirements. Although these are not images as such, it is easier to define them here, as they are unlikely to change if you reuse the image sets. More on that later. So let's click Creation Requirements. First we need to select our idle images that we added earlier for the empty plot. So from the idle sequence drop-down box, select Empty Plot. The From frame is 0, as we want this idle to show before anything has been built. If you're adding creation requirements, the first entry must start from 0. The destruction can also be empty plot, as this is what will show if the player destroys the building at this stage of construction. Now we need to add this to the table below, so click Add. Next we want the dug plot. This image set is shown after the leveler has finished leveling and before the builder has started building. This happens just before frame 36 of construction. Enter 36 into the frame box. You can get a preview of this image to make sure you got the right one by clicking the preview button. As you can see, it's the first frame of the builder building. If we look at frame 35, we can see it's the last frame of the leveling. You want the from frame to be the next frame after everything has been delivered. So it should be frame 36. Let's set destruction to destruction empty and then add this to the table. Next we have when the builder has finished building the frame and needs the second plank. So let's select frame from the idle sequence. This time we want destruction plank, as we will be returning a plank if the building is destroyed at this stage. The building resumes from frame 86. Let's add this as well. Finally, we need to select the idle set of the completed building. Destruction plank is needed again. This time there is no from frame as it is a final requirement, so let's click Add Final Requirement button. And there we have the 4 stages of construction. Of course, your building can have as many or as few stages as you want. Next we need to tell it what items are required for each stage. So let's start with before anything has been built by clicking on row 1 and then clicking the Configured Required Items button. Before anything is built, we need a leveler to go to the building. So let's select Leveler from the Creation Item box. We only want one leveler, so let's leave creation amount as 1. We don't need to override the idle sequence we set before, so we're going to leave creation idle as none selected. And finally, the leveler is coming from the warehouse, so we need to check the From Warehouse checkbox. Let's add that requirement. Now we need to set what happens if the user destroys the building at this point. We want our leveler back, so let's select Leveler. There is only one leveler, so let's leave destruction amount as 1. We don't need to override the destruction idle we set before, but we only want the leveler back if he has arrived at the building. So let's check only when stopped and then add this to the table. That's all we need to start the creation, so let's save that and close. Now we need to define what is required as the leveler has finished digging. So we need to click on row 2 and then Configure Required Items button. Let's select the leveler again in the Creation Items box. Leave Amount and Idle as they are, but this time we are leaving From Warehouse unchecked, as we want the leveler to return to the warehouse, and add that to the table. Now we need 2 items from the warehouse, a builder and a plank. This is where the idle override comes into play, as we want to show an idle image set for when one arrives at the building but the other has not. This idle image set will be shown instead of the idle we defined before in row 1. Let's define the builder first, so select builder from the creation item box and we only want one. This time we select got builder in the creation idle box, so that idle is displayed when the builder arrives. Finally, check the from warehouse as he's coming from the warehouse and then add that to the table. Now for the plank, so select plank, override image idle set needs to be got plank, and that is also from the warehouse. Add this to the table. For destruction, we only want to return the builder. The player will lose the plank if they destroy the building now. Let's select builder in the destruction item. We don't need a destruction idle override, we only need to return the builder if he has arrived to the building. Add this, save and close. Next, row 3 for when the frame has been built. Configure creation requirements. We only need a plank to come from the warehouse and there is no idle overrides needed for this creation, so let's add that. For destruction, we want to return the second plank if it has arrived at the building, and we want to override the default destruction idle, so select plank and check when stopped. The destruction idle override we want is destruction. This will override the destruction plank idle we set before in row 3 and will be displayed after the plank has been collected. We also want to return the builder to the warehouse, so let's select builder, set the destruction idle to none and unchecked when stopped, as we always want to return the builder and he will never be stopped as he is not coming from the warehouse. Let's save and close. Finally, we need to configure what happens when construction is finished, so select row 4 and configure again. This time we want to return the builder to the warehouse and get the forester from the warehouse. For destruction, we want to return the forester if he is stopped, and to always return a plank, so when stopped unchecked, with the overrides as before. And save and close. We now have everything needed to create the building, so let's save and close. The last thing we need to do is configure what happens if the builder is destroyed when it's in use, so let's click Destruction Requirements. At the top we need to select the default destruction idle. This will be displayed when nothing is overridden it. For this we need to select Destruction Plank, as we will be returning a plank if the building is destroyed. Now let's select plank and this will override the default idle without a plank. Let's add that to the table. Now we want to return the forester to the warehouse, so let's select forester, select none for the override and then add that to the table. And that's it, so let's save and close. Now we have all the images configured for the forester, so let's save that to the XML to permanently save our changes. Next thing to do is to create a forester that can use the images we just defined and plant trees. So let's select Add New Building. Let's give it an internal name of forester and set some text to display to the player by clicking Localize Text. This will be displayed when the player clicks Info for more information on the buildings before placing them. Now we need to select the image set to use. We have only defined one, so forester is selected for us. Let's set up some building actions, so let's click the Actions button. As the forester interacts with a map item, we will need to set an area. If we do not do this, then we will not be able to configure the map item later. Let's set a map area of 10. This represents the X and Y span blocks. We can leave fixed area unchecked, as we are happy for the player to change the working area. Now for internal name for this action, let's say plant tree. The image actions for actions that take place at the building, so we can leave this as none. The issue idle can be set to issue. This idle image set will be displayed if the building cannot complete this action. Must fulfill can be checked if the builder must complete this action before moving on to any other actions. As this is the only action for this building, it does not matter if it is checked, so let's leave it unchecked. Now let's add this action to the table with the Add button. Next we must click on the newly added row in order to configure it some more. First, let's add some text to describe that action to the player by clicking on Localize Text. We only need to set the title for the action. Let's click on the row again. The forester does not require anything in order to plant a tree, so let's ignore required for now. But it does in order to produce a tree, so let's click on Produced. The forester does not produce any warehouse items, so we can ignore Produce Item, Produce Amount, and Produce Carry. But we do need to configure the worker images used when going to and from the tree. Before going to the place where he is going to plant a tree, we need the image set we defined earlier of him carrying a tree. So set Produce Worker Out to Forester with Tree. On the way back he will not have a tree, so we can set Forester for Produced Worker In. Let's add that to the table. Now select the row we just added and select Map Items. In Map Items is the tree map item we defined earlier, and currently it's the only map item we have. The action we want to display when he gets to the tree is Plant Tree. Let's add that to the table, save and close. That's all we need for Produce for the forester, so let's save and close again. And this is the only action we need, so let's save and close again. Finally, we need to configure what the building is allowed to be placed upon. In the Allowed Upon box, we have grass and the tree map item we defined. The player cannot build upon a tree, so let's just select grass. Grass is anywhere there is not a map item. That's everything we need, so let's save our first building to file by clicking Save to XML and close. Now we have created a building that creates the tree map item. Let's make a building that destroys it to get wood from it by creating the woodcutter's hut. A woodcutter is needed to work at the woodcutter's hut, so let's create him by clicking Edit Item. In the same way we added the forester, we need text and images like I've added here. We also need to add some images of woodcutter carrying wood, but that does not need any text. Also, as we did with the forester, we need to add all the building images needed. Here I have added the name, span and static image already. Let's add some idle images, so click Idle Images. The woodcutter has a simple animation when it is in idle state, so let's add these images now. The remainder of the idle image sets are similar to before, so let's add them in but in the same order. We will see why later. Note that issue also has 4 images. Let's set the walkover as we did with the forester, and add the creation and destruction images, which is the same number of images as the forester. Actions are not required for the woodcutter either. Now let's set up the building creation requirements. As this building's creation format is very similar to the forester's, we can import the forester's image creation requirements. At the bottom of this form there is a drop-down box that has the image sets we have already created. This is currently populated with the forester. If we click Import Now, we will import the requirements from that image set. The editor will do its best to get the requirements to fit the images we have just added. So let's click Import Now and then confirm it. We now just need to tweak it. First, click on row 4 and then click Configure Required Items. Currently we have a forester as a requirement, as we imported it from the forester hut image set. That needs to change. So let's select forester in the top table and then click Edit and then Remove. Let's change it to woodcutter in the creation item box and then re-add it to the table. Let's do the same to the bottom table for destruction, and then save and close, and then save and close again. Finally, we need to do the destruction requirements, just like we did with the forester hut image set, but this time returning a woodcutter. Now we just need to save and close, and then save to XML. Now to add the building, so click Edit Buildings and then click New. Add a name and some localized text, then select the woodcutter image set. Click Actions. As before, we need to set an area as the woodcutter interacts with a map item. So let's put in 10. Enter a name for the task and select the Issue idle image set, and then add that to the table. Select the row and then add some localized text for that task. This time we need to click Required. The item we require is wood. The amount and carry can stay as 1, as we will be taking 1 wood from the tree. Work it out is the woodcutter, and work it in is the woodcutter carrying wood. Let's add that to the table. Now select the row again and click Map Items. As we selected wood, and wood is an attribute of a tree, the tree appears in the box. This time we want to set the map item action to cut down, so we display those images that we set when we created the tree's image set. Add that to the table, save and close, and then save and close again. Now we want to select the row and click Produce. The Produce item is wood. Work it out as the woodcutter carrying wood, and work it in as just the woodcutter. Add that to the table. As we did not set a map item for Produce, the wood will be taken to the warehouse. Save and close, and save and close. Now we just need to select grass from the loud on, and we are done. Save to XML. Now for a building that takes an item from the warehouse, works on it, and then returns another item to the warehouse. For this we need some working images, so I created a sawmill worker with text, a sawmill worker carrying wood, and a sawmill worker carrying a plank. The image set is very similar to the Foresters, except with a sawmill worker. So I've created the idles, creation and destruction already. The only addition we need is to set action images, as the sawmill worker works at the building. Let's click Action. Let's enter a name for the building's image action. Let's call it Making Planks. Then add the images of the building for the action and set the skip to 2. Add this to the table, save and close. Everything else I have done, so I'm going to save this to XML. Now all the images have been added for the sawmill, let's create the sawmill itself by clicking Edit Buildings and then clicking New. This time we want the sawmill image set that we just created, and then fill in all the other text etc. like we did before. Let's click Action, enter a name for this action, let's call it Turn 1 wood into 1 plank. For the image action, select Making Planks. This is what we just added for the image action. Select an idle image set for the issue and add this to the table. Add some localized text. Select the row and click Require. This requires 1 wood with a carry of 1, a sawmill worker out and a sawmill worker with wood in. Add that to the table. As this is coming from the warehouse, we do not need to set a map item, so we are done. So let's save and close. Now do the same for Produce. The produced item is a plank, with a sawmill worker with a plank out and a sawmill worker in. This is also coming from the warehouse, so we can just save and close. That's it for the sawmill, so let's save and close it and then save to XML. Now to create the warehouse. Warehouses use stone in their creation, so let's add that now. We also need a warehouse worker, and a warehouse worker carrying all the items that are stored in the warehouse. So far this is wood, planks and stone. I've added these here. Now we need the images for the warehouse. The warehouse span is slightly bigger than the other buildings, and the number of creation images are different, but the process is the same. The creation requirements are a little bit different, so we need to do this from scratch, rather than import them from another building, as no other buildings have the same amount of frames etc. The final requirement is 5 workers, rather than 1 like the other buildings. More on this later. Now let's click Add New Warehouse. The first form is very similar to buildings. The only difference is it has stored items instead of actions. Let's increase the number of workers to 5, so more workers can transfer items to other warehouses and buildings. Let's click Stored Items. In the Warehouse Item drop-down box, we have all the warehouse items that we've created so far. That is all the items that have localized text. We will need to add all these to the warehouse, so let's start at the top. So let's leave wood selected and then set the maximum amount to 10. This is the maximum amount of that item that the warehouse is allowed to hold. Worker carry is the amount of that item that a worker can carry when transferring items between warehouses, and also taking items to buildings that are being created. The worker out is the warehouse worker carrying wood, and the worker in is just the warehouse worker. Let's add that to the table. Plank is very similar to wood, with the warehouse worker carrying a plank, so let's add that. Forester is a worker, so we do not need to select a worker in and a worker out, as it will just use the images for the forester. We do need to set a max. Worker carry is not needed either, as this will always be 1. Let me add the remaining items. Note that you can change the order of the items stored by using the move up and move down buttons. The order they are listed here is the order they will be in the game when a player clicks on a warehouse and sees its inventory. Now we have all the items added, we just need to configure workers. Select the worker row and click Make Item. We want a worker to be created every 10 seconds. This will slowly increase as the player plays the game until it reaches its maximum amount. These workers are then used in the creation of another warehouse, as we saw before. So let's leave Create as 1 and change the frequency to 10. Nothing is required to create a warehouse worker, so we do not need to fill out the required item part of the form. We just need to click the Add button at the bottom. This is the only recipe for a worker, so we can click Save and then close this form. We will cover more warehouse item recipes later. Now we have finished the warehouse, we just need to save and close, and then save to XML. Now we have all our buildings and map items created, it's time to create a level using them. Remember that some attributes of a building and map items cannot be updated if they are being used by a level, so it's best to test before adding too much to a level, as you may need to remove them in order to change the attribute. As we are happy with what we've created so far, let's create our first level. Click on Add New Level. Now we need to give it a name for our reference. Let's call it Gitwood. Next we need to define a playing area. This cannot be changed once the map has been created without deleting the entire map. Let's keep this one small. Let's make it 60 blocks across and 35 blocks down. Now we need a map image. A map image can become quite a large image, as it will be resized to fit the map X and map Y we just set. You can keep the file size down by reducing the number of colours used in the image. In Photoshop you can use the Save for Web option to do this. The image must be in a PNG format and must not have any transparent colours. Let's browse for the image. The file name will remain the same when imported into your project, so bear this in mind when naming your map images, as they will all be in the same folder and may overwrite each other. Finally, we need to set what buildings the player can add to the map. There must be at least one building. For level 1 we will add all the buildings we have created. These will appear in the order that they have been checked. Let's add that to the table using the Add button. Select the newly added row and add some localized text, just like we did for the buildings. This will be displayed in the main menu during level selection. Next we need to create the map, so select the Edit Map button. First we need to add a warehouse to our map. All maps must have at least one warehouse. So select the warehouse from the first drop down. Ensure that the mode is in Add to Map, then position it on the map. When we are happy, we can just left click to place. We can scroll the map by left clicking and holding, and then moving the mouse while the left mouse button is held down. Nothing will be placed while scrolling. If we misplace an item, we can remove it from the map by selecting the mode Remove from Map from the second drop down. Note that map items that are covered cannot be removed until the item that is covering them is removed. The final mode is Configure. This allows us to set the amount of attributes a warehouse or map item has. Let's use that now to configure our warehouse. Select the row of the item you want to update and then enter the value of how many you want of this item. Let's give the player 10 planks to start with by entering 10 into the box and then clicking Update. Let's also give them 3 foresters, 3 levelers, 2 builders, and so on until all of the items have been updated. Now we have added what we want the user to start with, we can save and close. Warehouses will always have none of their items when they are added to the map, whereas map items will always have their maximum. For example, if we added a tree, it will have 1 wood. Now we are done, let's save the map by clicking Save and then Close. Finally, we need to add some targets that the player must achieve in order to complete the level. So let's select the row again and then click the Targets button. Let's set how many seconds the player must complete the level in. In order to achieve a goal time, let's put 720 seconds, which is 12 minutes. For a silver time, let's put 960 seconds, which is 16 minutes. And for bronze, 1200 seconds, which is 20 minutes. Now we need to set the items needed. For level 1, let's have 15 wood. So select wood as the item and enter 15 as the amount, and add that to the table. We also want the player to collect 15 planks for completion. So let's select planks, add 15 again, and then add this to the table. That's it for the target, so let's save and close. We have now added all the requirements for level 1, so let's save this to XML and then close. Now we have added a level to our project is now playable. To test, you will need to upload your project to some web space that does not change the folder structure, and then put the link to the main folder that contains the XML into the Little Hoarders game, so it can download your assets. Let's start adding the builders and map items we need to create level 2. Let's start with the map items. There are 2 map items added for this level, an apple tree and an apple tree with fruit. After an amount of time has passed, an apple tree becomes an apple tree with fruit. When all the apples have been picked, an apple tree with fruit becomes an apple tree again. When a map item turns into another map item, they must share the same span size. This is to make certain that they will fit in the same space. They must also have the same list of allowed on items. As before, we must create the images for the map items. Let's set them both up now. For the apple tree, I've already set a name, static image and a span of 3x3, and the idle images. I've also set a walkover grid as follows. Now we need to set the creation images, so let's click creation and add some images of a tree growing, and then save and close this. Click destruction. Add an image of a tree stump, and then put a long skip, just like we did with the tree. For action, we have 2 image sets. The first is planting the apple tree with a skip of 2, and the second is chopping down the apple tree. And that's it for the apple tree. Now for the apple tree with fruit. This has the same span of 3x3. Here are the idle images and the walkover grid. Let's add the creation images. As you can see, the images are of the tree getting fruit. Let's save that. Let's click destruction. We don't need any destruction images for the apple tree with fruit, as this map item cannot be destroyed in game, so let's leave this blank. Click action. These are the images for collecting apples. That's all we need for this one, so let's save and close. And that's it for the apple tree with fruit, So let's save that to XML. As an apple tree with fruit requires apples, we need to add this new item, as I have here. Add the general fields for an apple tree. This is pretty much the same as a tree, but with different text and the image set to apple tree. Save this to XML. Let's also set up the general fields for an apple tree with fruit. This uses the apple tree with fruit image set. And then save this to XML. Now let's go back to the apple tree and set up the actions and attributes. First the actions, so click Action. Like the tree we set up before, an apple tree gets planted by a forester and cut down by a woodcutter. So let's add these actions in. Now for the new action. After an amount of time has passed, the apple tree turns into an apple tree with fruit. Let's enter a name of Become with Fruit. This does not need an image action, as the growing of apples is taken care of with the creation of the apple tree with fruit. So let's leave that as none. Note that the image action points to this map item's action and will take place before turning into a new map item. The map item we want to change into is apple tree with fruit, and after the change we want the apple tree with fruit's creation images. Note that the state points to the new map item state. In this case it will fire the creation sequence of the apple tree with fruit. Now we need to set when to fire the Become with Fruit action. So let's set a timer 12 seconds and point it to Become with Fruit action. The map item will remain an apple tree that can be cut down by a woodcutter for 12 seconds, and then it will become an apple tree with fruit. Let's save and close that. For the attributes, the apple tree contains wood, that the woodcutter is looking for, as seen here. Next we need to configure the apple tree with fruit. So let's save and go back to that, and then click Actions. We do not need to define the creation or destruction actions for this, as it does not need to be planted by a building or cut down by a building. Of course we could define it being cut down if we wanted to. There are two actions we want to set against it. The first is simply a fruit picker picking fruit. Let's call it picking apples and use the image set for fruit picker picking apples. It does not need to change after the fruit picker has picked apples. In fact, nothing needs to happen. So let's add that. When all the apples have gone, we need to change back to the apple tree. So let's define that. Let's call it Change to Fruitless. There are no image sequence we want for that. We want it to become an apple tree, but with no state. With no state, it will instantly become an idle apple tree, as we do not want to show it growing again. So add this, save and close. Open the attributes. We want it to have apples. Let's make it 3 apples can be picked before it becomes an apple tree again. And when all the apples have gone, we want to call the change to fruitless action that we just defined. Let's save all this to XML. Now we need to add the buildings that will interact with the apple tree and apple tree with fruit. Let's start with the forester and woodcutter that will, like with the tree, plant and cut down apple trees. We can reuse the image set that we used for the level 1 forester and woodcutter. We just need to create new buildings. Here I have recreated the forester, just like the one for level 1, and just called it level 2 forester so we can tell it apart from the first one we set up. Click into Actions and you can see I've already added an action for planting a tree, just as before. The only difference is we want a second action for planting an apple tree. This is set up in exactly the same way. The only difference is the map item is an apple tree instead of a tree. By having 2 actions, the player can deactivate either of the actions in game. The woodcutter is done in exactly the same way, with the second action for cutting down an apple tree. There's nothing groundbreaking with the apple picker. We need a fruit picker worker and a fruit picker worker carrying apples. The building needs its own image set, so I've created that, and it works just like a woodcutter, only collecting an apple from an apple tree with fruit, and then taking that apple to the warehouse. The last building for level 2 is a level 2 warehouse. not forgetting to create a warehouse worker to carry the apple when transferring it between warehouses. The Level 2 warehouse uses the same image set as the Level 1 warehouse. It also needs to store more items. Let's click Store Items and then import all the store items from the first warehouse. Now we need to add fruit picker and apples. These did not exist in Level 1. And that's it for the Level 2 warehouse, so let's save that to XML. Creating Level 2 is the same as creating Level 1, using the sawmill from Level 1 and the Level 2 woodcutter, forester and warehouse. We also need to add the new fruit picker hut. On the map, instead of using the Level 1 warehouse, we need to use the Level 2 warehouse. And of course we need to configure it so the player has some fruit pickers, along with all the other workers and items needed for that level. There is nothing new on Level 3 that we have not seen before, so let's have a quick look at the map items. The pond image set does not have any creation images, as we are adding it to the map ourselves, rather than through a building. When a map item is added to a map, its default is to have the max number of items that is set in its attributes, unlike a warehouse where they are all 0. Let's take a look at its actions. We have collect water. This action is called by the water purifier, showing the pond's image set for water collection. Nothing happens after this action. Next we have fishing, called by the fishing hut. This shows images of fishing and nothing happens afterwards. Finally we have drying pond. This doesn't call any images apart from the destruction ones. Let's take a look at the attributes. First we have water. When this has been depleted, this calls drying pond and destroys the map item. We also have fish. Nothing happens when this has been depleted. The buildings that interact with the pond are the water purifier, that takes one water from the pond, works on it at the building just like the sawmill does, and then returns one water to the warehouse. The fishing hut takes one fish from the pond and then takes that to the warehouse. The other map item is wheat. This has 3 actions. Decaying. This is called after 74 seconds have passed. This shows some images of wheat decaying, and after those images, the destruction images are shown. The next map item action is sowing. These show the farmer sowing corn, followed by the creation images of the wheat growing. And finally we have reaping, which show images of the farmer harvesting the wheat that are followed by the destruction images we saw earlier. The attributes for wheat is corn. The buildings we have are the farm, that has 2 actions. The first is taking water from the warehouse and sowing the wheat. The second is reaping the wheat for 1 corn and then taking that corn to the warehouse. The mill takes corn from the warehouse, works at the building, and then returns flour to the warehouse. And finally we have the bakery, that takes water and flour from the warehouse, works at the building, and then returns bread to the warehouse. There is a new warehouse type for this level, the food store, that can store some items that the small warehouse cannot. Apart from water, the small warehouse for this level cannot store items the food store can store. Level 4 introduces a new map item type, the deer, which is a moving map item. Let's take a look at the images needed for this map item. Idle images are not required for map items that move, so we do not need to set any. For the walkover grid, we only need to set the entry-exit point, as the map item will always be able to be walked over. You can set creation and destruction images, but as the deer can only be placed during map creation, I did not need to set any. I also decided I did not want any destruction images after the deer had been destroyed. The action for the deer is the deer being hunted by the hunter. Now for the movement. Just like with the worker, a moving map object must have 8 images, 2 for each direction, as shown. You can optionally add images for each direction when the map item is not moving. These can be any number of images. The game will randomly pick a number between 1 and 8. 1 to 4 will display the map item moving either left, right, up or down. whereas Fighter A will display the stationary images that are defined for up sequence, right sequence, etc. When the movement has been completed, or the sequence has been completed, another random number is picked. When the map item has been targeted, in this case by the hunter, the static image will be shown whilst the worker is going to the map item's location. Let's take a look at the deer's actions and attributes. The only action is the deer being hunted, which then calls destruction. The deer contains one meat. The hunter's hut interacts with the deer, taking one meat from the deer and then taking it to the warehouse. The well is another new building. The well worker works at the building and produces one dirty water that then gets taken to the warehouse. The water purifier has an extra action of taking two dirty water from the warehouse, working at the building and then returning one water to the warehouse. Next we have the mountain map items. These are very simple as they only have a static image and one idle image, as nothing needs to interact with them. There are 5 types of mountain map items: a full square mountain and full triangle mountains in all directions. These can be put together on the map to create the mountain shape we want. As for the mountain map items themselves, these all have is flat checked. This ensures that the mountain is always underneath any other items that are on top of it. All mountains have no actions or attributes because nothing interacts with them, but it is worth noting that if they were interacted with, that this would not happen whilst any map item is covering them. For ores, we have hidden and discovered. For hidden, all 4 ore types are the same image set, hidden, hidden. This has an action set of images showing a geologist looking for a resource. Let's take a look at the map item, stone hidden. This has an attribute of 1 stone. However, the player will not know this because the show attribute checkbox is unchecked. The is flat checkbox is checked, just like the mountains. Hidden stone is also only allowed on a mountain square. If we look at the actions, we see discovering. This is called by one of the geologist's 10 actions to look for stone. It collects the 1 stone that is stored in the hidden stone attributes and plays the image set's action of a geologist looking for the resource. Note this is not taken to the warehouse. The change to mark is called when the stone has been depleted, as we can see in the attributes. This does not show any image sequence, but does change the map item into the stone resource. If we look at the stone resource, we can see it uses the stone resource image set. This is just a static image and an idle of the stone marker. This, however, does have the show attributes checkbox checked, so the player can see what is left. There are 2 actions for this map item. Get 1 stone is called by the stone mine, which shows no image sequence and does nothing. The clear action is called when the stone is depleted, and calls for the destruction images. As there are no destruction images, the map item is just removed. As we can see, the resource has 10 stone in its attributes. Coal, iron and copper all have similar actions to stone. Let's take a look at the stone mine. Stone mines are allowed on square mountains, northeast mountains and northwest mountain triangles. They are also allowed on all types of ore, hidden and discovered. If a map item is covered by a building, it can still be interacted with. It is only if it's covered by another map item that it will be ignored. That said, if a worker needs to go to a map item using pathfinding, the path must be clear, which may not be the case if it has been obscured by a building. However, mines do not need a worker to pathfind to a resource. Let's take a look on how this is set up. As this is a building that interacts with a map item, it has an area set. In this case it is set to 10. It also has fixed area checked. This means the player cannot change the working area of the mine. Instead, it will gather within 10 blocks of where the mine is placed. The player will need to destroy the mine and build it somewhere else if they want to change its area. The mine has a build and action set. This shows the miner descending into the mine, just like working at the building that we have seen previously. Let's take a look at the mine's requirements. First, it needs a ration pack that it gets from the warehouse, but it also needs 1 stone. This is taken from the stone resource. Note that carry, work it in, and work it out have not been set. This is because the item is taken instantly from the resource without the worker travelling to it. This can only be done with map items. Coal, iron and copper mines all have similar actions to the stone mine. The level 4 food warehouse has several make items for the ration packs. This allows the player to choose the recipe they want to use for this item. You can also allow them to create items in bulk, rather than have to click create 5 times, or have one every second for auto-create. As shown here with the crate amount set to 5. They must of course have all the items first. Level 5 does not have anything new to show. It has a large warehouse that has no creation or destruction images. This means the player cannot destroy the one that is there. It is also not included in the level's buildings, so another cannot be placed. The large warehouse has a make item recipe against all the workers, as well as the item needed to create them. These items are all created in the toolmaker's building. Some require iron and plank, and some just a plank. The foundry image set has many action sequences, so a different animation can be used for each of the foundry's actions. And that pretty much covers everything that is used in the game. The only thing left to do is for you to upload your creations to some web space and then share the link with your friends, or upload it to the Little Hoarders forum. Link to that in the description. Also check out the forum for other building ideas that are not covered here, and for more level sets. Have a good day, and I look forward to seeing what you can come up with. Thanks for watching.